This is elephant skin. Very, very hard to come by, very expensive, and very controversial. So we're gonna cut these things in half, not just to see how good these Rio boots are, but also to figure out what is elephant skin, how is it different, what are the pros and cons, why is it all pebbled like this, how is it legal but still kind of illegal, what are the ethical implications, and mostly I just wanna get lots of cool macro shots to really start delving into these more exotic leathers, because regardless of this, they do perform different, and there are distinct advantages and disadvantages based on the animal that the leather came from. But this might be one of the harder ones I've ever cut in half, because I've always wanted some elephant skin boots. So is elephant leather ethical and legal? Well, it's a pretty long history, and just to kind of define some things, elephant skin has been used for the creation of leather goods for centuries as part of the Asian and Africa, and there is a difference between the two because Asian elephant skin is mostly known for its sturdy and textured properties, which is traditionally used for shoes, armor, and parchment, whereas the African elephants, they're bigger, they have a thicker hide, so they were more historically used for shields, for clothing, drums, belts, sandals, even for sandpaper. And before huge colonial expansion, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and across Africa, elephant hide was associated with royalty, with ceremonial uses, and it was something that held significance, not just culturally, but almost spiritually because of how they viewed elephants. But as colonial expansion grew and opened up global trade, elephant leather exploded in popularity and increase spiked. And by the mid-1900s, elephant populations were plummeting. So much so that Asian elephants were considered endangered with only 40 to 50,000 remaining globally. Meanwhile, the African elephants were classified as vulnerable with 415,000 estimated remaining. So in 1975, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora was established to regulate global trade of endangered species and their parts, including elephant hides. So by 1989, cities had listed African elephants under Appendix 1, effectively banning all international trade in elephant parts. But it wasn't just the export of elephant parts, it was also the hunting of elephants, which had a bigger impact on the local communities that took care of those populations. But the hope was that they could be replaced with photography, ecotourism, the whole safari idea. And obviously the objective with that was all positive, but it had a huge impact on the local individuals and communities that used elephants as a resource, not just their parts and their leather, but also for hunting. And this also caused an imbalance in populations where a lot of issues started to rise between local villages and the local elephant populations because of their habitat shrinking. So because of that, in 1997, cities, or I don't know, I'm probably saying it wrong, sites, they downlisted Botswana and Zimbabwe elephant populations to Appendix 2, which allowed limited and regulated trade in elephant products, including leather, under strict export permits and quotas. And since then, each of these countries have gone back and forth on legalizing and criminalizing elephant hunting, but for the most part, they land back on legalizing elephant hunting. So today, elephant leather can really only be legally exported from Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa. But just like anything with a high demand and limited supply, there's a black market that inevitably pops up, contribute to the poaching and shady methods of elephant product exports, and causes a huge issue with the local communities that try to protect their wildlife, like elephants, from poachers. And this is where this whole thing really starts to get very complex with the hunting, with the maintaining of the animals while still utilizing them without exploiting them. And that's more of the ethical side of things, because most of these brands that are sourcing leather ethically, they're going to steer clear of anything from the black market and really showing that they have the certifications to be selling real elephant leather. But just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's necessarily ethical. The boot breaker system has been the surprise success of all the products that we launched this year. And I think it's because it was needed. I think people really, really needed this thin little 2mm bit of foam that just helps you break in your boots, adds a little bit of squish to your heritage boots without changing your size, without destroying any of the value that you get from a heritage boot, and somehow nobody did it. And because of that, we expanded out into some leather boot breakers, because people are like, make it out of leather. So we could do that, we got the dyes. People are like, we want a thicker one. And I was like, I do too, actually, because we could use a little thicker one. And then people are like, we want an even thicker one. Give us a big old mattress to put in our boots. And I was like, we could probably find it, and you're in luck, because we sourced this thick mattress of an Insole. If you want tons of squish in your shoes or boots, or you want to take up a ton of room and have a lot of squish, if you want to run like a little thin leather insole on top of a lot of squish, you can combine the two. And that's kind of been the fun of the boot breaker system, is it's half driven by what you guys want and what you see is needed. Because honestly, I thought this was the only thing we were going to launch, and now we've launched 3 different thicknesses of leather and now 3 different thicknesses of foam, because they seem to be useful. And I think sometimes when it comes to product design, simplicity rules overall. Sometimes you just don't need to overdo it. Sometimes there's a simple need in the market, and that's exactly what the boot breakers were. So check them out below. Check out the new super thick daddies, and add some squish to your life, add a little heritage to your life, and check them out below. So now let's start reviewing this boot. And what is this boot? Well, the brand is Rios of Mercedes. The style is the R9031 16-inch jade Navajo bison and brick oiled elephant boots. They weigh 2 pounds, 9.5 ounces. They retail for pretty steep, $8.99, and they're made in Mercedes, Texas. And the way they position this boot is elephant is tanned in pieces, with each piece having its own distinct grain, some heavy, some smooth. It is a very popular leather and is fairly available due to the governments in South Africa not wasting meat or hides of those animals taken for population control. If you do want a pair of these, check them out via links in my description. So now let's start going through all the details, starting with the leather first, and we're gonna compare it to the leather on the Heritage Captains that we collaborated with Thursday with. So what are these leathers? Well, the top here is that jade Navajo bison, and the vamp is that brick oiled elephant. So what are the main differences between elephant and just a regular leather like the Heritage Captains? Well, number one is just the visual look. It has all these creases, it has this really unique little pebbled effect on top. You can kind of scratch them off. It almost feels like a football, actually. They're extremely abrasion resistant and it's really durable, but like they mentioned, it is a very dry leather. It also doesn't scuff nearly as bad because it's such a hard leather. You know, you can kind of scratch on it with your fingernails, a little ASMR, and you don't see any visual scratching. But just like any leather from any animal, there's gonna be parts of the animal that make a better, tighter leather and some that's a lot looser and has a lot more flexibility. And these to me, they seem not maybe the most premium cuts, but they're not really big stretchy belly parts. And it's some of the most expensive leather you can buy. It's anywhere from $30 to $75 a square foot, whereas most leather is anywhere from like $4 to $10 a square foot. And as for the bison leather, we've covered it plenty of times in all the other videos, but just to give you the basic stats, both of these are about 2 millimeters thick, which is right on par with what you see with like the Heritage goods. You see most work boots anywhere from 2 to 3 millimeters thick. But how do these perform on the burn test? Well, the bison performed pretty well because there's a lot of oils and it's a fairly thick leather, it's substantial. Compare that to the elephant. The elephant's so dry that it just kind of shrank up and wrinkled and got really brittle. So it's definitely not the most fire resistant material. And then if you look at the cross section of these, I thought for sure that the elephant would be like a big slab of like cowhide where it has a big gradient and a really thick grain, but you look at the cross section and it's pretty thin. It looks a lot more like the ostrich leather that we've cut apart. It looks almost like bird leather. So it's a little bit disappointing, but how does this compare on the puncture test? Well, it did pretty well. So here's the other results, but the elephant leather did just under 100 pounds. But man, I would love to see a big, heavy slab of high quality elephants and compare it to this. Because so far I'm not as impressed with the elephant hide as I thought I was gonna be. You know, it looks cool, but like for how endangered it is and how hard it is to get and how controversial it is, it's like, it doesn't seem like you get a lot of actual value from the leather solely because it's from an elephant. And as for the rest of the boot, if you look at the lining, it's pretty standard lining. You can see it's got this rolled unfinished edge on the side. It's a very standard lining leather. It's not heavily finished, it's not super natural, but you can still see the pores. So it's a good lining leather. If you look deeper on the inside, you can see it has a veg tan heel counter. And then for what you're actually standing on, it does come with a little thin insole, very, very thin and really dense. This, just in the toe itself, it's only 3.5 millimeters thick. So I do like that it comes with the insole. And I like even more that it's built more traditional. It's a full length veg tan insole and it has a little bit of a sock liner right in the heel, but it's really, really rough in there. The traditional way of doing cowboy boots is a leather sole, and sometimes more modern versions will put a rubber sole on or a rubber half sole, but this has zero leather in the sole. It's just, I thought for sure it was leather until I actually started prepping for this video. This is just like a rubber that looks like leather. And that's gonna be better because it's gonna be grippier. It's gonna give you a little more cushioning underneath your foot and shock absorption. It's gonna wear a lot better. But for $900, I don't want a rubber midsole and a rubber sole. I want some leather in there. So that was really shocking there was no leather in the sole. It comes about a 80 Shore A, and it's about 3.5 millimeters thick. They call this the tan oxbow with neoprene. They say these solid rubber soles look a lot like real leather soles and are flexible and will wear well. It's about 5 to 6 millimeters thick. It's really, really hard at 90 Shore A. We did the bar drop test on it, bounced up 6 inches, and the puncture test took 269 pounds to puncture through, so pretty impressive. But for $900 to have a rubber sole and a rubber midsole without any leather through the sole construction, I'd be a little bummed. I'd want some like thick leather through there. So now let's cut these in half and really see how quality these are on the inside. What is going on with the insole? Like, what is that I'm feeling? And I feel like I don't trust this. I'm gonna cut it in half because there might be some corners cut. So let's cut them in half. This right here is my favorite child. But this right here is my dad's least favorite child. But there's still some hope for us because you can get a brand new Rose Anvil product made right here in the shop at 25% off. but you also get an apology letter to try to win back some love of your dad. So 25% off until Monday. Check it out below. All right, we got them cut in half. And if you're not subscribed, consider pushing that little subscribe button. So now, let's see what's inside. So what do we have? It does have a steel shank. I was glad to see a nice steel shank in there. There's a little bit of leather underneath the shank to prevent it from squeaking, give it a little support and fill in some of that void. But what is going on the inside here? It is the stitch from the Goodyear well. Pretty poorly stitched together. You can see all the way through here, that stitch is coming through. But at least we know it's a true Goodyear well because you're literally standing on the thread. And there is no dedicated counter, you're just using that counter as the actual heel counter. Toe stiffener is also leather, which is really impressive, even for 900 bucks, because it is an exotic leather. I was shocked to see it had a leather toe stiffener. And so it's not all terrible. I think there's probably some other versions they have that have more leather in the sole construction, and it does have a leather insole. So for once, pleasantly surprised to see what was on the inside. Despite this flaw, and I think this would have got caught in QC, they'd probably replace it, because I can't imagine all their boots are like that, but that is a pretty big flaw. So now it's cut in half. Do you get any benefits from using elephant hide over regular leather? Is it thicker? Is it stronger? Is it all these things that I'd hope for? Not really. I think the only benefit that this specific boot on this hide gets from elephant leather is just the look. And so that's where the ethical question comes into me. Like, clearly it's legal, but is it ethical? It kind of depends on what you value and how you mean ethical, because are you getting anything extra from elephant skin that's actually be functional, that's gonna be worth the extra price, that's worth using the hide of an animal that's endangered or at least on the threatened list? Not practically, not functionally, it's all aesthetic. And that's where I think you have to individually draw the line. Am I okay with this? Am I actually using it? And some people won't care. Some people are like, I just like the look of it. I like wearing elephant skin. I personally hunt. That doesn't bother me as much. But I lean on the side of saying, like, well, if I'm gonna use elephant hide, I want it to be useful. I want it to be special. I want like a purpose for it. I don't want just a look. And so that's kind of where I draw my ethical line. And everyone's gonna have their own ethical line, but ultimately it is legal, and there is some ethical implications you need to think about. And now you know that you don't always get ultra thick, all those things that people describe about elephant leather being more abrasion resistant, thicker, more durable. It's not always the case. But I was a little underwhelmed by this elephant leather, to be honest. A lot underwhelmed by this boot because it had all those flaws, kind of messy on the inside. And I don't think it's a poor quality boot. I think it's just the quality control was pretty poor on this. So let me know what you guys think and what your opinion is on the ethical aspects of elephant hide and the legal aspects. Do you think it should be illegal? Where do you draw the line and how do you draw the line? And thank you guys. See ya.